A billionaire asked a black single dad to act as her husband. She couldn't resist from kissing him hard. But before any of that could happen, he had to survive the moment that almost destroyed them both. The boardroom is silent except for the hum of overhead lights and the click of a laptop closing. 60 people, investors in tailored suits, board members with decades of power in their posture, cameras trained on the front of the room. The air smells like expensive cologne and cold ambition. At the center of it all stands a man in his 60s, silver-haired, holding a stack of printed documents like a weapon. Gerald Whitmore, godfather to the CEO, voice of the old guard. And right now, he's smiling. "I think," he says, his voice calm, almost gentle, "that we all deserve the truth." He places the documents on the table. Contract terms, payment records, bank transfers, 50 pages of proof that the man standing near the back of the room, the black man in the custom suit, the one with the scarred hands and the quiet eyes, was paid $75,000 to pretend, to play a role, to act as someone's husband when he was nothing more than a cafe worker 6 weeks ago. The room erupts. Gasps, whispers that cut like knives, camera flashes pop. The CEO, a woman who built an empire and is watching it crack in real time, goes pale. Her lips part, but no words come. The man doesn't defend himself. He just stands. He's been here before, in a different life. He knows what it looks like when powerful people decide you don't belong. He turns toward the door. It's over. He knew it would end this way. Then a voice, small, clear, cuts through the chaos like, "My dad is the best architect in the world." Every head turns. A 9-year-old girl stands in the doorway, braids with bright beads, NASA backpack, eyes that haven't learned to be afraid yet. She walks into the room, looks at her father, says it again, louder this time. "He just loved us more than buildings." The man stops. His shoulders shift. Something hardens in his expression, not anger but decision. He doesn't walk toward the door. He walks toward the presentation screen. And in that moment, everyone in the room realizes the same thing. They have no idea who he really is. If you believe that the most dangerous thing in the world is underestimating a quiet man, stay with this story, because what happens next will make you believe in second chances. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments. Have you ever hidden who you really are to protect someone you love? But to understand how a cafe worker ended up in a billionaire's boardroom with his daughter defending his name, we need to go back 6 weeks to a rainy Thursday morning in Atlanta, where two people's lives were about to collide in the most unexpected way. The steam hissed from the espresso machine as Marcus St. Clair wiped down the counter for the 3rd time that morning. His hands moved in practiced circles, the worn cloth finding every water ring and coffee stain. The cafe hummed with its usual rhythm. Construction workers hunched over breakfast sandwiches, tech employees typing on laptops, the door chime announcing arrivals and departures like a metronome. Marcus preferred it this way. Busy meant invisible. He was a solid man, 42, with warm brown skin and graying temples that caught the light from the Edison bulbs overhead. His shoulders were broad beneath the cafe's black polo shirt. When he moved, there was a slight hitch in his left leg, nothing dramatic, just enough that someone paying close attention might notice. No one paid close attention. "Morning, Marcus." A regular hard hat, paint-stained jeans slid onto a stool at the counter. "The usual?" "Coming up." Marcus reached for a mug without looking. His right hand, scarred across the knuckles and palm, gripped the ceramic with careful pressure. The regular watched him pour. "How's your girl doing?" "Still building that bridge." Marcus's expression softened. "Finishing it tonight. She's been working on it all week. Smart kid. She is." The man took his coffee and left the dollar in the tip jar. Marcus pocketed it and returned to wiping tables. Around him, the cafe buzzed. Glass towers rose beyond the windows, sleek and modern, crowding out the old brick buildings that used to define this neighborhood. The gentrification had been slow at first, then fast. Now the block was half construction site, half finished luxury. Café Lumière sat right in the middle, still serving $5 lattes to people who couldn't afford the condos going up next door. Marcus's shift ended at 2. He untied his apron, nodded to the afternoon crew, and stepped into the October afternoon. The air was crisp. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk. He walked with his hands in his pockets, favoring his left leg just enough to shift his weight. The old Fourth Ward unfolded around him as he walked. Tree-lined streets, corner stores with hand-painted signs advertising phone cards and fresh greens, a barber shop where someone called his name and waved. He waved back. An older woman swept her porch. She nodded. He nodded back. This neighborhood knew him. He'd lived here 7 years, and in that time he'd become part of its fabric. The quiet man who worked mornings and picked up his daughter every afternoon. Zoe's school was a low brick building with a faded mural of the solar system. Marcus waited by the fence with the other parents. When the doors opened, kids poured out in a tide of backpacks and laughter. Zoe spotted him immediately. She ran, braids clicking with bright plastic beads, her backpack bouncing. It was covered in NASA stickers. Planets, rockets, the Hubble telescope. "Dad!" She crashed into him, and he steadied her with both hands. "Hey, kiddo. Good day? We're learning about bridges. I told Miss Jackson I'm building one at home. She said I should bring it in." They started walking. Zoe talked the entire way. Her teacher said this. Her friend said that. Someone brought cupcakes for their birthday. Marcus listened, asking questions in the right places, letting her voice fill the space between them. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up with creaky stairs and thin walls. Inside, it was small but tidy. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that barely fit a table, a living room with a couch and a bookshelf. Zoe's artwork covered the fridge. Marcus's work shoes sat by the door. Dinner was simple. Spaghetti with store-brand sauce. Zoe told him more about her day between bites. After, she spread her homework across the table while Marcus washed dishes. Math problems, a reading worksheet. She finished both, then pulled out a notebook. Marcus dried his hands and leaned over her shoulder. The notebook was filled with sketches. Buildings, mostly. Some realistic, some fantastical. A tower with spiraling balconies. A house built into a cliff. A bridge suspended by cables so intricate Marcus could see the tension calculations she didn't know she was making. "You're getting good at this," he said quietly. Zoe looked up, her eyes bright. "Do you think I could be an architect someday?" Marcus's throat tightened. "I think you could be anything you want. Did you ever want to design buildings?" The question hung in the air. Marcus straightened, his scarred hand resting on the back of her chair. "I thought about it once," he said. "A long time ago. Why didn't you? Life had other plans." Zoe studied him for a moment, then returned to her sketches. She didn't push. She never did. Marcus was grateful for that. Bedtime was at 8:30. Marcus tucked her in, listened to her talk about the bridge she'd bring to school tomorrow, kissed her forehead. When her breathing slowed and deepened, he stepped back into the hallway and closed the door halfway. The apartment was quiet now. Marcus stood in the kitchen, the only light coming from the stove hood. On the shelf above the sink sat a framed photograph. A woman, laughing, her head thrown back, sunlight caught in her hair. Simone. 7 years gone. Marcus didn't look at the photo directly. He never did. But he felt it there, the way you feel a presence in a room. He sat at the table and stared at his right hand. The scars ran deep, jagged lines across his palm and knuckles. The accident had done more than break bones. It had taken fine motor control, precision, the things you needed to draft buildings by hand, to translate vision into line. He flexed his fingers. They moved, but not the way they used to. Marcus stood and checked the schedule on his phone. Another morning shift tomorrow. Another day of coffee and invisible efficiency. He set his alarm, turned off the light, and prepared for the routine to continue unbroken, the way it had for 7 years. He had no reason to think tomorrow would be any different. Rain hammered the windows of Café Lumière as Marcus refilled the drip coffee station. The morning rush was thin. People huddled under awnings outside, waiting for the downpour to ease. Water streaked the glass, blurring the street beyond into gray shapes and movement. The door chimed. A woman stepped inside, already talking into her phone. She was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked expensive even soaked. Her heels clicked against the tile floor. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair pulled back tight. She moved like someone perpetually late for something important. "I don't care what the optics team says," she said into the phone. Her voice was clipped, businesslike. "The board wants stability. That's what I'll give them." She didn't look at Marcus as she approached the counter. He waited. She kept talking, gesturing with one hand while scrolling on her phone with the other. Her nails were manicured, painted dark red. No, no. That's not. She stopped mid-sentence, exhaled sharply, and looked up at Marcus for the first time. Cortado, not now. Marcus nodded. Coming up. He turned to the espresso machine. Behind him, the woman muttered something into the phone, then ended the call. Marcus could feel her frustration radiating across the counter. He pulled the shots, steamed the milk, poured with the same careful precision he brought to every drink. When he set the cup down in front of her, he said quietly, "Careful, the handle's hot." She glanced up. Her eyes flicked to his hands, first scarred, steady, then to his face. Something shifted in her expression, a brief assessment. Then she looked away. "Thanks," she said, "not warm, just transactional." Marcus stepped back. The woman paid without looking at him again. She took her coffee to a table by the window and sat, staring out at the rain. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. 15 minutes passed. The cafe stayed quiet. Marcus wiped down the counter, restocked napkins, moved through his routine. When he glanced toward the window, the woman was staring at him, not subtly, just watching, like she was solving a problem. He looked away. A few minutes later, she stood and walked back to the counter. Up close, Marcus could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers gripped her phone too tightly. "I need to ask you something," she said. Marcus waited. She glanced around the cafe. Only 2 other customers, both absorbed in their laptops. She turned back to him and said very calmly, "I'll pay you $50,000 to pretend to be my husband for 6 weeks." The words hung in the air. Marcus blinked. "Excuse me? You heard me." Her tone didn't shift. "Public appearances, a few dinners, some photos, nothing illegal, just optics. I need someone presentable, and you fit the profile." Marcus stared at her. "Ma'am, I think." "It's a business arrangement," she interrupted. 6 weeks, $50,000, cash or direct deposit, your choice." He set down the cloth he'd been holding. "I'm not interested." Her jaw tightened. 75,000. Still no. "You're a cafe worker," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Do you understand what I'm offering you? $75,000. That's more than you'll make in 2 years doing this." The cafe went quiet. The 2 customers at their laptops looked up. Marcus felt the familiar weight settle in his chest, the weight of being seen as less than, of being reduced to what someone assumed he was. His jaw locked. He didn't respond. The woman leaned forward. "Is it pride, or are you just incapable of understanding opportunity when it's handed to you?" The words cut cleanly. Marcus's hands rested flat on the counter. He didn't move, didn't speak. She pulled a business card from her purse and slapped it on the counter between them. "When you come to your senses, call me." Then she turned and walked out. The door chimed. Rain swallowed her silhouette. Marcus stood there for a long moment. The other customers went back to their laptops. No one said anything. He picked up the card. Expensive stock, embossed lettering. Victoria Ashford, Chen CEO, Meridian Global Properties. He slid it into his pocket and returned to work. That evening, Marcus and Zoe sat at their small kitchen table. Dinner was over. Homework was spread out in front of her, math problems she'd already finished, a reading log she was filling in with careful handwriting. "Dad?" Zoe looked up. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "There's this camp," she said. Her voice was careful, like she was testing the words. "Miss Jackson told me about it. It's for kids who like design and building things. They do projects all summer, real ones." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Where is it?" "Here, in Atlanta. But it costs money." She paused. $8,000. The number landed like a stone. Marcus kept his expression neutral. "That sounds amazing, kiddo." "I know it's a lot," Zoe said quickly. Miss Jackson said I should apply. She thinks I'm really good at this stuff." "You are really good." "So can I apply?" Marcus looked at his daughter. Her eyes were bright with hope she was trying to contain. She'd learned not to ask for too much. The accident had taught her that. Taught both of them. "Let me look into it," he said. Zoe's smile was small but real. "Okay." After she went to bed, Marcus sat alone at the kitchen table. He opened his banking app on his phone, checked his balance. Did the math he already knew by heart. Rent, utilities, groceries, Zoe's school supplies. The number in his account wasn't enough, not even close. He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he pulled Victoria Ashford Chen's card from his pocket. turned it over in his scarred fingers. The embossed lettering caught the light from the stove hood. $8,000. $75,000. Marcus set the card on the table, looked at the closed door to Zoe's room. Heard her voice in his head, careful and hopeful, asking if she could apply. He picked up his phone and dialed the number on the card. 2 days after the phone call, Marcus stood outside a glass tower in Midtown Atlanta. The building stretched 30 stories, all sleek metal and reflective windows that caught the late afternoon sun. His reflection stared back at him from the lobby doors. A man in a worn suit, hands in his pockets, jaw set. He pushed through the doors. The lobby smelled like expensive marble and cold air conditioning. A security guard directed him to the top floor. The elevator ride was silent except for soft instrumental music that made his skin itch. When the doors opened, Marcus stepped into a space that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Minimalist furniture, white leather, chrome accents, sharp edges. Everything gleamed. A woman in a tailored blazer sat behind a desk made of glass and steel. "Mr. St. Clair," she said without looking up. "She's expecting you. Conference room, straight back." Marcus walked down a hallway lined with abstract art he didn't understand. His footsteps were too loud against the polished floor. Through an open door, he saw Victoria standing by the windows, her back to him. She wore a black suit today, her hair pulled back the same severe way. A man in his 60s sat at a long white table, a leather briefcase open in front of him. "Marcus." Victoria turned. Her expression was neutral, professional. "This is David Chen. He'll walk us through the contract." The lawyer stood and extended his hand. Marcus shook it. Chen's grip was firm, assessing. "Please, sit." Chen gestured to the chair across from him. Marcus sat. The chair was expensive and uncomfortable. Chen pulled a thick document from his briefcase and slid it across the table. The pages were crisp, official-looking. Marcus could see numbered clauses, dense legal language, signature lines at the bottom. 6 weeks, Chen said. His voice was measured, clinical. "You'll accompany Ms. N.N. Embers Chen, Ashford Chen to schedule public events, dinners, galas, business functions. You'll present as her fiancé. Separate accommodations will be provided. $75,000 will be deposited into an account of your choosing upon successful completion of the term." Marcus flipped through the pages. The words blurred together. Termination clauses, non-disclosure agreements, behavioral expectations. "What happens if either party terminates early?" Marcus asked. Chen blinked. Victoria, standing by the window, turned slightly. "Excuse me," Chen said. "Section 12, subsection 100. Marcus tapped the page. "It says termination is possible under specific circumstances. What are those circumstances?" Chen exchanged a glance with Victoria. "Breach of contract, failure to perform agreed-upon duties, disclosure of confidential information. And payment in that scenario? Prorated based on time served." Marcus nodded. He kept reading. Chen watched him with a new expression. Curiosity, maybe, or caution. After 15 minutes, Marcus signed. Chen collected the documents and stood. "I'll have copies sent to you by end of business tomorrow." He shook Marcus's hand again, nodded to Victoria, and left. The room was quiet after the door closed. Victoria moved to the table and sat across from Marcus. She slid a folder toward him. "Cover story," she said. "We met through mutual friends. Started dating 8 months ago. Kept it quiet because of my board. Recently engaged, no ring yet. I'm having one designed." Marcus opened the folder. There was a timeline. Key dates, names of supposed mutual friends. Details about fictional dinners, trips, conversations. "Memorize this," Victoria said. "First event is Thursday, investor dinner. High profile. I need you presentable." She pulled out another sheet. A list of menswear stores, appointment times, a budget that made Marcus's chest tighten. $5,000 for clothes. "Someone will meet you at the first address tomorrow at 10, she continued. "They'll fit you for suits, shirts, shoes, everything you need." Marcus stared at the paper. "Do you have questions?" Victoria's tone was brisk, businesslike. This was a transaction, nothing more. "Why did you choose me?" Marcus asked. Victoria's expression didn't change. "You fit the profile." "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." She stood. "Thursday, 7 p.m. A car will pick you up at your address. Be ready." She walked toward the door, then stopped, turned back. Why did you say yes? Marcus looked at her. The question hung between them. The same one he'd been asking himself since the phone call. He thought about Zoe's face when he told her she could apply to the camp, the way she'd hugged him so hard his ribs ached. He didn't answer. Victoria studied him for a moment, then left without another word. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with Zoe. Dinner plates were cleared. She was working on a math worksheet, her pencil moving in careful strokes. Dad? She looked up. You've been quiet. Just thinking. About what? Marcus chose his words carefully. I took on some consulting work. It'll mean I have to go to some events in the evenings, dinners, things like that. Zoe's eyes widened. Like fancy events? Some of them. That's so cool. She grinned. What kind of consulting? Just helping someone with a project. Nothing exciting. Will you have to wear a suit? Probably. Zoe's grin got bigger. Can I see you in it? Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Sure, kiddo. After she went to bed, Marcus stood in the bathroom, staring at his reflection. He practiced the cover story in his mind. Mutual friends. 8 months. Quiet relationship. The words felt foreign in his mouth, like a language he didn't speak. He closed his eyes and the memory came unbidden. A different office. Glass walls. Blueprints spread across a drafting table. Simone beside him, her hand on his shoulder, pointing to a detail in the design, her voice saying his name. The smell of her perfume. The way the light caught her hair. The memory fractured. The bathroom was small and dim. The man in the mirror looked tired. His phone buzzed on the counter. A notification. Delivery scheduled for tomorrow, 6 p.m. The next evening, Marcus opened the door to find a garment bag hanging from the knob. He brought it inside, laid it across his bed, and unzipped it slowly. The suit inside was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored. The fabric was soft under his fingers, nothing like the off-the-rack suit he'd worn to the contract signing. There was a white shirt, still in packaging. A tie, silk, subtle pattern. Shoes in a box. It fit like it had been made for him. Because it had been. He looked at himself in the mirror, wearing someone else's clothes, preparing to live someone else's life, and wondered if Zoe would even recognize him when this was over. 3 days later, Marcus stood outside Antico on Peachtree Street, his reflection caught in the restaurant's tall windows. The new suit fit perfectly. Charcoal gray, crisp white shirt, subtle tie. He looked like someone else. Someone who belonged in places like this. The restaurant's entrance was discreet, marked only by polished brass fixtures and a doorman in white gloves. Marcus checked his watch. 6:58. Victoria had said 7 sharp. A black car pulled up to the curb. Victoria stepped out, moving with the same efficient grace he'd seen in the cafe. She wore a dark blue dress tonight, elegant and severe. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders. She looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. You clean up well, she said. Thank you. She moved closer, adjusting his tie with quick, businesslike movements. Her perfume was subtle, expensive. When we go in, take my arm. Smile. Don't talk unless spoken to. Follow my lead. Understood. And Marcus. She stepped back, her eyes meeting his. Don't improvise. The private dining room was all dark wood and soft lighting. A table for 6, crystal glasses already filled with water. 3 men in their 60s sat along one side, suits that cost more than Marcus made in a month. A younger woman, maybe 40, sat at the far end, tablet open in front of her. She looked up when they entered, her gaze sharp and assessing. Victoria's touch on his arm was light, impersonal. Marcus felt the performance begin. Gentleman, Rebecca. Victoria smiled, warm but controlled. Thank you for making time. Victoria. The man at the head of the table stood. Silver hair, deep tan, rings on 3 fingers. And this must be Marcus, Marcus St. Clair. Marcus shook his hand. The man's grip was firm, testing. Robert Caldwell, pleasure. Introductions followed. The other 2 men were investors in Meridian's Miami project. Rebecca was their analyst. Everyone smiled. No one meant it. Dinner started with small talk. Not no one meant it. Dinner started with small talk. Golf, market fluctuations, a charity gala someone was practiced ease. Marcus stayed quiet, present but not intrusive, the the way they'd agreed. The food arrived. Something French that Marcus couldn't pronounce. He ate carefully, watching how the others used their silverware, mirroring their movements. Then Caldwell set down his fork and leaned back. "Victoria, the first have been reviewing the Miami expansion timeline," he said. His tone was friendly, but his eyes were cold. "It's ambitious for someone so new to legacy leadership." The table went quiet. Rebecca's fingers stilled on her tablet. The other two men exchanged glances. Victoria's spine straightened, but her voice stayed level. "We projected conservative estimates based on— I'm sure you have." Caldwell smiled. "But projections and reality are different things, aren't they? Especially when you're managing multiple high-stakes developments simultaneously." The condescension in his voice was thick enough to touch. Marcus watched Victoria's jaw tighten. Her hand rested on the table, fingers pressed flat against the white tablecloth. Under the table, Marcus found her other hand. He didn't grab it, just rested his palm against hers, steady pressure. Grounding. Victoria's breathing changed. She didn't look at him, but her fingers shifted, accepting the contact. "I appreciate the concern, Robert," she said, "but I didn't build this company by being cautious." The conversation moved on. Caldwell backed off, but his point was made. The other investors asked technical questions about the Miami tower height restrictions, zoning complications, construction costs. Then Caldwell mentioned structural delays. "The foundation work is behind schedule. Engineering keeps revising the load-bearing calculations." Marcus spoke before he could stop himself. "What's the current span-to-depth ratio on the primary supports?" The table went silent. Caldwell blinked. "Excuse me?" Marcus's chest tightened. He'd overstepped, but Victoria was looking at him now, and he couldn't take it back. "The ratio," Marcus said, keeping his voice casual. "If the delays are in the foundation, it's probably a distribution issue. Are they using post-tension concrete or conventional rebar?" Caldwell stared at him. "I'd have to check with our engineers." "Marcus reads too much architecture news," Victoria said quickly, a small laugh in her voice. "He's obsessed with building design. I can't take him past a construction site without him stopping to analyze it." The table laughed. Tension broke. Rebecca made a note on her tablet, her expression thoughtful, but Caldwell was still watching Marcus with new interest. "That's quite specific knowledge for a casual reader." "I like buildings," Marcus said simply. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Dessert arrived. Coffee. By 9, the dinner was ending. Caldwell shook Marcus's hand again, holding it a moment longer than necessary. "Interesting man you found, Victoria," he said. "The first think so." Outside, the air was cool. The car was waiting. Victoria didn't speak until they were both inside, the door closed, the partition raised. "Where did that come from?" she asked. Marcus looked out the window. The city passed in streaks of light. "What?" The question, span-to-depth ratios, post-tension concrete. She turned in her seat to face him. "That's not something you learn from reading news articles." "I like buildings." "That's not an answer." The lie sat between them, heavy and obvious. Marcus could feel her watching him, could sense her mind working, reassessing. He kept his expression neutral. "I read a lot," he said finally. Victoria studied him for a long moment. He could see the questions in her eyes, the curiosity she was trying to suppress. Then she sat back, her gaze shifting to the window. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for what you did. Under the table. You looked like you needed it. I did." They drove in silence. The city gave way to Marcus's neighborhood. Smaller buildings, darker streets, fewer lights. The car pulled up outside his apartment building. Marcus reached for the door handle. "Marcus." He turned back. Victoria was watching him again, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Who are you?" she asked. It wasn't accusatory, maybe even vulnerable. Marcus opened the door. "Good night, Victoria." He stepped out. The car door closed. Through the tinted window, he could see her silhouette, still turned toward where he'd been sitting. The car didn't move. Marcus climbed the stairs to his apartment, the question following him like a shadow. Inside, he loosened his tie and sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his scarred right hand. In the car below, Victoria sat alone in the silence, replaying the dinner in her mind. The way Marcus had moved through the conversation. The ease in his posture. The technical precision of his question. The confident way he deflected. She pulled out her phone and opened a browser. Typed, span to depth ratio architecture. The results flooded her screen. Technical articles. Engineering journals. Graduate-level textbooks. Nothing a casual reader would know. She looked out the window at Marcus's building, and for the first time since this arrangement began, she wondered what else he was hiding. 1 week after the dinner, Marcus stood in a conference room at Meridian Global headquarters. The space was large and sterile, all glass walls and polished floors. Afternoon light poured through the windows, making everything too bright. An event coordinator circled them like a director blocking a scene. She was in her 50s, wearing a headset and carrying a clipboard. Her heels clicked against the floor with each pass. "Again," she said, "and this time I need to believe you're in love." Victoria looped her arm through Marcus's. She tilted her head toward him, the way her publicist had coached her, smiled. The coordinator sighed. "You look like colleagues at a networking event," she said. "This is the merger galley. Cameras everywhere, investors watching. If they don't buy this, Victoria, your board will have ammunition." Victoria's jaw tightened. "We're doing what you asked. You're performing what I asked. There's a difference." The coordinator gestured at them. "Try again, softer, more natural." Marcus could feel Victoria's frustration radiating through her arm. She adjusted her posture, tried a different angle. It still looked rehearsed. The coordinator shook her head. Marcus turned to Victoria. Marcus turned to Victoria. "May the 1st. She blinked. "What?" "Try something different." Victoria hesitated, then nodded. Marcus slid his hand to the small of her back. "Not fast. Not aggressive. Just steady and sure." He pulled her closer, closing the space between them until her body was against his. She was warm. Solid. He could feel her breathing change. "Look at me," he said quietly. Victoria lifted her eyes. This close, he could see the flecks of gold in her dark irises. The way her pupils widened slightly. She was taller than most women he'd met, but he still had a few inches on her. She had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. "Better," the coordinator said. Her voice sounded distant. "Much better. Hold that." Marcus didn't move. Neither did Victoria. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. He could feel her pulse where his hand rested against her back. "Perfect," the coordinator said. "That's what I need at the gala entrance. Can you recreate that?" Victoria stepped back quickly. Her breath was uneven. "Yes, we're fine." Marcus let his hand drop. The space where she'd been felt cold. The coordinator made notes on her clipboard. "Gala is Saturday. 7 o'clock arrival. I'll send you both the final timeline." She looked up. "And Victoria, whatever you just did, do that." After she left, Victoria and Marcus stood in the empty conference room. The silence stretched. "Thank you," Victoria said finally, "for fixing that. It's what you're paying me for." She studied him for a moment, something unreadable in her expression. Then she turned and walked out. That Saturday, Marcus met Victoria and Zoe at a restaurant in Buckhead. The place was bright and busy, filled with families and the clatter of silverware. Zoe sat between them in the booth, her braids tied with purple ribbons today, her backpack on the seat beside her. She was quiet at first, shy. She answered Victoria's questions in single words, eyes down. Then Victoria asked about school. Zoe's head lifted. "It's okay, we're learning about bridges." "What kind of bridges?" "All kinds. Suspension bridges, arch bridges, beam bridges." Zoe pulled a notebook from her backpack. "I've been drawing them." She opened it. Page after page of sketches. Some were copied from photos. Others were original designs, bridges that existed only in Zoe's imagination. Victoria leaned closer, genuinely interested. "These are impressive," she said. Zoe's face lit up. "Really? Really, you have a good eye for structure." "Dad says that too. But he won't tell me how he knows about buildings." Zoe looked at Marcus. "He just says he reads a lot." Victoria's gaze flicked to Marcus. He kept his expression neutral. "Your dad is very smart," Victoria said carefully. The conversation opened up after that. Zoe talked about her design camp application, about the projects they'd work on, about her teacher who said she had potential. Victoria listened, asked questions, didn't talk down to her. Marcus watched the exchange, surprised by how natural Victoria seemed with his daughter. Then Zoe reached for her juice and knocked it over. Purple liquid spread across the table. She froze, eyes wide. "It's okay," Marcus said. He grabbed napkins, sopped up the spill while a server brought towels. Zoe's hair had caught some of the juice. Marcus gently worked the wet strands free, braiding them back with the same patient movements he perfected over 7 years of being the only parent. When he looked up, Victoria was watching him. Her expression had softened in a way he hadn't seen before. The next 10 days were a blur of appearances. A charity event at the High Museum, a gallery opening in Midtown, a business luncheon at the Commerce Club. Each one required the same performance. His hand at her elbow as they entered, her fingers laced with his during photos, practiced kisses on the cheek for cameras that lingered half a second too long. The touches accumulated like rainfall. Small, constant, impossible to ignore. At the charity event, Marcus opened the car door for her. Shoulders when she shivered. At the luncheon, he steadied her elbow when she stumbled on cobblestones and heels, things that felt automatic to him. Thoughtful gestures he'd done for Simone without thinking. But Victoria noticed. He could see it in the way she looked at him after, like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. Victoria sat through board meetings and found her mind drifting, found herself staring at her own hands, remembering the weight of his palm against hers under the dinner table. The steadiness, the way it had grounded her when Caldwell was tearing her apart. Marcus lay awake at night in his small apartment. The bed felt too big at night in his small apartment. He'd close his eyes and feel the curve of Victoria's waist under his hand during photo ops, the way she'd fit against him during the rehearsal, the warmth of her. Neither of them acknowledged it. Neither brought it up. The contract had 3 weeks left. 3 weeks into the arrangement, the night before a major board meeting, Victoria stood alone in her penthouse. The city sparkled below. She held her phone, scrolling through photos from that evening's event. A tech industry mixer, her and Marcus posing for press. There. That one. His hand on her waist, her body angled into his. Both of them smiling, but something in their eyes suggested the performance was starting to crack. Victoria's thumb hovered over the delete button. She pressed it. The photo disappeared. She stared at the blank space where it had been, then opened her recently deleted folder and restored it. The boardroom on the 23rd floor of Meridian Global smelled like leather and cold ambition. Victoria sat at the head of the conference table, international partners flanking both sides. Her expansion proposal was displayed on the screen behind her. 12 months of work, millions of dollars. Her vision for what the company could become. Gerald Whitmore sat 3 seats down, silver hair catching the fluorescent light. He looked relaxed, patient, like a man who knew exactly how this would end. Victoria finished her presentation, polite applause. Then Gerald leaned forward, his voice carrying the weight of decades in boardrooms just like this one. Victoria the First have concerns. The room shifted. Partners looked up from their tablets. Your expansion timeline is aggressive, Gerald continued. His tone was gentle, almost fatherly. Some might say reckless, especially for someone so new to legacy leadership. Victoria's spine straightened. The projections are conservative. We've accounted for. Have you? Gerald smiled. Because from where I sit, this looks like ambition outpacing judgment. You're proposing we invest heavily in markets you don't fully understand, on timelines that leave no room for error. He turned to address the international partners. These are the kinds of decisions that determine whether a company thrives or collapses. The question we need to ask is whether Victoria is ready to lead a legacy this significant. The words landed like stones. One partner frowned, another made a note. Gerald's tone had been kind, concerned. The content was character assassination. Victoria's hands rested flat on the table. Her breathing stayed measured. I appreciate your concern, Gerald, but this company was built on calculated risks. My father understood that. I understand that. And these numbers support the strategy. Your father, Gerald said quietly, spent 40 years earning the trust required to take those risks. You've had 3. The meeting continued for another hour. By the end, 2 partners had shifted from supportive to uncertain. A third had started asking questions that sounded like doubt. Gerald had done exactly what he intended. He'd planted seeds, made Victoria look impulsive, young, unready. When it was over, Victoria gathered her materials with steady hands. She thanked the partners for their time, smiled, projected confidence she didn't feel. Then she walked to the parking garage alone. Marcus was waiting by the car, exactly where he was supposed to be. He was in a suit today, one of the ones Victoria had bought him. He looked up as she approached, and something in her expression made his posture shift. He opened the door. She got in. He followed. The door closed. The world outside became distant, muffled by tinted glass and expensive soundproofing. Victoria sat very still. Then her hands started shaking, not dramatically, just a tremor she couldn't control. Her breathing fractured, coming in shallow pulls that didn't reach her lungs. She stared straight ahead, jaw locked, refusing to let this be anything more than a physical reaction. Marcus didn't ask what happened, didn't offer empty comfort. He just reached over and took her hand. The touch was steady. Grounding. The same pressure he'd used under the table at the investor dinner. But this time, there was no performance, no audience. Just his palm against hers, warm and solid and real. "You don't have to perform for me," he said quietly. The words cracked something open. Victoria turned to look at him, really looked. The scar above his left eyebrow, the silver threading his temple, the way his thumb was moving in slow circles against her palm, a gesture so small and careful it made her chest ache. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, careful, restrained, like he was holding something back. The space between them felt impossibly small. She could count his breaths, could see the exact moment his gaze dropped to her mouth. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Every clause of their contract screamed at her to stop, to maintain distance, to keep this professional. She didn't care. Victoria leaned in. Marcus went still. For one, Victoria leaned in. Marcus went still. For one terrible second, she thought he'd pull away. Thought he'd remind her of the contract, the boundaries, the carefully constructed lie they were supposed to maintain. Then his free hand came up to cup her jaw. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, and he kissed her. Not the chaste press of lips they'd performed for cameras, not the careful, measured contact designed to look convincing from a distance. This was deep and hungry and real, like he'd been starving for this, and finally, he was allowed to take it. Victoria gasped into his mouth. The sound was swallowed as she grabbed his shirt, pulled him closer. 7 weeks of suppressed want ignited between them. His hand moved from her jaw to her hair. Her fingers found the warm skin at the back of his neck. They were too close, not close enough, the car too small for what was building between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Victoria realized the partition between them and the driver had been raised. She didn't remember hearing it move. Marcus's mouth was stained with her lipstick. Her hands were still fisted in his shirt. Neither of them spoke. The car pulled out of the garage and into Atlanta traffic. Horns honked somewhere distant. The sun was setting, painting the glass towers gold and orange. Inside the car, the silence was charged, electric, impossible to break. Victoria's mind was racing. This changed everything. The contract had 3 weeks left. 3 weeks of maintaining the fiction that this was business, that they were professionals playing roles, that none of it was real. But her lipstick was smudged across Marcus's mouth. Her heart was still pounding, and when she looked at him, she saw the same realization in his eyes. They'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. The car moved through traffic. Neither of them moved apart. Marcus's hand was still in her hair. Victoria's fingers were still pressed against the warm skin of his neck. The city passed outside the windows, oblivious to the fact that inside this car, in the space of a single kiss, everything had shifted. The driver's voice came through the intercom, professional and distant. "Mr. St. Clair, we're approaching your address." Marcus's hand slowly withdrew from Victoria's hair. She released his shirt. They separated, putting careful inches between them. Victoria smoothed her dress. Marcus wiped her lipstick from his mouth with the back of his hand. The car stopped. Marcus reached for the door handle. "Marcus," Victoria said. He turned back. Their eyes met. In the fading light, she could see the question there, the same one burning in her chest. What happens now? But she didn't have an answer, so she said nothing. Marcus got out. The door closed. The car pulled away. Victoria sat alone in the silence, her hand still warm from his touch, and knew with absolute certainty that nothing about the next 3 weeks would go according to plan. 2 weeks passed. The kiss was never mentioned, never repeated. But it lived between them in every touch. At a tech summit, Victoria's hand found Marcus's arm for the cameras. His fingers closed over hers, and she felt the pressure of his thumb against her palm, the same slow circle he'd traced in the car. Her breath caught. The photographer smiled and moved on, oblivious. At a charity auction, Marcus steadied her elbow as she stepped from the car. His hand lingered half a second too long. She looked up. Their eyes met. Everything else fell away. At a business luncheon, they sat side by side while Victoria's partners discussed quarterly projections. Under the table, their knees touched. Neither moved away. The contact was small, hidden, electric. Victoria sat through board meetings and found her mind drifting. She'd be reviewing expansion budgets, and her gaze would land on her own hands. She'd remember the way Marcus's fingers had tangled in her hair, the warmth of his palm against her jaw, the sound he'd made when she pulled him closer. She'd force her attention back to the spreadsheet. The numbers swam. Marcus lay awake in his small apartment, staring at the small apartment, staring at the ceiling. The contract had 2 weeks left. 14 days. Then the charade would end, and he'd have to decide if what happened in that car was real or just another performance that had gone too far. He'd close his eyes and see Victoria at the press conference that afternoon, polished, commanding, answering questions about the merger with the same sharp intelligence that had first caught his attention. Then she'd glance toward the back of the room where he stood, and for just a moment her expression had softened. He'd had to look away. All he could think about was the sound she'd made when he kissed her. Neither of them spoke about it. The unspoken agreement was clear. Not until the contract ends, but the tension was unbearable. Gerald Whitmore watched from the shadows of boardrooms and gala corners. He'd been watching since the investor dinner when Marcus asked that question about load-bearing calculations. Too specific, too technical, too confident. At a subsequent cocktail event for international developers, Gerald stood near the bar and listened as Marcus spoke with one of Victoria's Miami partners. The partner mentioned construction delays on the tower project. Marcus asked 2 clarifying questions, then sketched something on a cocktail napkin, an alternative approach to the foundation work. The partner stared at the napkin, then at Marcus, then pulled out his phone to photograph it. "This could save us 8 months, the partner said. "Maybe," Marcus replied. "I'd need to see the full plans to be sure." Gerald set down his drink and walked away. By morning, he'd hired a private investigator. The report came back within a week, 53 pages. Employment history, marriage certificate, death certificate, hospital records from the accident. Articles from architecture journals, photos of buildings Marcus had designed, a career that had ended 7 years ago, abruptly and completely. Gerald read it twice. Then he smiled. He called a private meeting with 3 senior board members, showed them the contract between Victoria and Marcus, showed them the payment records, showed them the investigator's report. "She's desperate," Gerald said, his voice smooth and certain. "So desperate for validation that she bought a husband, and not just any husband, a failed architect pretending to be someone he's not. This is the woman you want leading a multi-billion-dollar merger?" The board members exchanged glances. One asked questions. Gerald had answers for all of them. "We exposed this at the merger signing," Gerald said. "Maximum audience, maximum damage. She'll have no choice but to step down." "And if she fights?" one board member asked. "She won't," Gerald said. "Not when everyone sees what she's really made of." The signing was scheduled for Friday, the 3 days away. On Wednesday evening, Gerald found Marcus outside Meridian's downtown office building. Marcus was waiting for the car to take him and Victoria to a gallery opening. He wore one of the expensive suits Victoria had bought him. He looked the part perfectly. "Marcus." Gerald approached with his hands in his pockets, his expression friendly. "Do you have a moment?" Marcus turned. His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed level. "Mr. Whitmore, I'll be brief." Gerald stopped a few feet away. "I know who you are. Ensley and Cross, the accident, all of it. And on Friday, everyone else will know too." Marcus didn't react, didn't flinch, just watched Gerald with dark, steady eyes. "Unless," Gerald continued, "you disappear before then. I'll pay you $100,000 to walk away quietly. Tonight. Don't attend the signing. Don't contact Victoria. Just go." "No," Marcus said. Gerald's smile thinned. "You're making a mistake." "Probably. I will destroy you both." Gerald's voice dropped, losing its friendly veneer. Victoria's career, your reputation. I'll make sure everyone knows you're a fraud. A failure who sold himself to a desperate woman. Your daughter will see it. Everyone will see it. Marcus's hands curled into fists at his sides. His breathing stayed controlled, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Are you finished? Marcus asked quietly. Gerald studied him for a long moment. Then he stepped back, his smile returning. Friday, conference hall. I hope you're ready. He walked away. Marcus stood alone on the sidewalk as evening traffic rushed past. His phone buzzed. Victoria, asking where he was. The car was waiting. Marcus stared at the message. Then he called her instead. Victoria. Marcus, what's wrong? He could hear the concern in her voice. The immediate shift from professional to personal. It steadied him. Gerald knows, Marcus said. About the contract. About my past. He's planning to expose everything at the merger signing. The line went silent. Traffic noise filled the space between them. Marcus waited. When Victoria finally spoke, her voice was quiet, thoughtful, not panicked, not afraid. Let him try. The conference hall on the 15th floor of Meridian Global was built for moments like this. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Atlanta, 200 seats arranged in theater-style rows. A stage at the front with screens, podiums, cameras on tripods. The merger signing was a performance, and everyone knew their role. Marcus sat in the third row beside Victoria. He wore the charcoal suit she'd bought him 6 weeks ago. His hands rested on his knees, steady and still. Around them, board members whispered to assistants. International partners reviewed documents on tablets. Financial press lined the back wall. Cameras ready. The presentations were concluding. Victoria's CFO walked through final projections, partnership terms, timeline. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Then Gerald Whitmore stood. He was in the front row, silver hair immaculate under the lights. He raised his hand, his voice cutting through the applause. Before we proceed, he said, I believe this board deserves transparency. The CFO paused mid-sentence. Victoria's spine went rigid. Marcus felt his chest tighten, but he didn't move. Gerald walked to the stage with the confidence of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. He carried a folder, set it on the podium. The room watched. 6 weeks ago, Gerald began, his voice calm and measured. Victoria Ashford. Chen paid $75,000 to a man named Marcus Saintine. Claire. The arrangement was simple. He would pose as her fiancé during merger negotiations, provide the appearance of stability, play a role. Whispers rippled through the room. Camera flashes popped. Gerald opened the folder and pulled out documents, projected them onto the screen behind him. The contract, Marcus's signature, Victoria's signature, payment records, bank transfers. This, Gerald said, gesturing to Marcus, is not her partner. This is a cafe worker she hired to make herself look legitimate. And this, he pulled out another document, is who he really is, a failed architect. Mark Claire, formerly of Hensley and Cross, career ended in 2018 after a car accident, hasn't designed a building in 7 years. More documents filled the screen. Employment records, the accident report, Simone's death certificate. Marcus's hands curled into fists. Gerald's voice grew louder, more theatrical. Victoria Ashford. Chen is so desperate for validation, so incapable of leading this company on her own merit, that she bought a husband, and not just any husband, a has-been who couldn't handle the real world, a man playing dress-up in suits she purchased for him. The room erupted. Board members turned to Victoria, demanding explanation. International partners looked between her and Marcus, expressions shifting from confusion to betrayal. Cameras swung toward them. Reporters shouted questions. Victoria's face had drained of all color. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Gerald raised his voice over the chaos. I'm calling for an immediate vote. Victoria Ashford. Chen must terminate this arrangement and step down as CEO, or I will withdraw my support for the merger and recommend her removal to the full board. The noise swelled. Accusations. Shock. The mechanical click of camera shutters. Marcus stood. The movement drew attention. Cameras turned. Marcus didn't look at Gerald, didn't look at the board. He looked at Victoria, and in her eyes, He saw the same thing he'd felt 7 years ago in a hospital waiting room, the moment when everything you built collapses and you have to decide if you'll stay in the rubble or walk away. He started toward the exit. He knew this was coming, had known since Gerald's warning. He didn't belong here, never had. The contract was over, the charade exposed. There was nothing left but to leave with whatever dignity remained. Then he heard it, a small voice, clear and fierce. "My dad is the best architect in the world." The room went still. Every head turned. Zoe stood in the doorway. She was supposed to be in the lobby with Victoria's assistant, a surprise for after the signing. But she'd heard everything. Her braids were tied with yellow ribbons today. Her backpack was still on her shoulders. She looked tiny in the doorway of the conference hall, surrounded by adults in expensive suits. But she walked forward anyway. Cameras tracked her movement. She walked past rows of seats, past board members and partners, past the press. She walked until she was standing in the aisle, looking up at the screen where her father's life was displayed, like evidence at a trial. "My dad is the best architect in the world," she said again, louder this time. "He just loved us more than buildings." Marcus's throat closed. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Zoe turned to look at him. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, but with something fiercer. The same determination he'd seen in Simone. The same refusal to accept that worth was measured by what you lost instead of what you protected. "You stopped because of me," Zoe said. "Not a question, a realization. After Mom died, you stopped designing buildings because you had to take care of me." Marcus's vision blurred. He nodded once. Zoe looked back at Gerald, then at the board, then at the cameras. "He's not a failure," she said. Her voice didn't waver. "He's my dad." The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus looked at his daughter, 9 years old, defending him in front of strangers who'd already decided who he was. He looked at Victoria, still frozen in her seat, her expression shattered. He looked at Gerald, triumphant on the stage, waiting for Marcus to leave so he could finish what he started. And Marcus made a choice. His shoulders straightened. The weight he'd carried for 7 years shifted, not disappearing, but changing shape. He wasn't walking away from this. Not anymore. Not when his daughter was watching. Not when she'd just told a room full of powerful people that love wasn't weakness. Marcus turned, not toward the exit, toward the presentation screen. His footsteps echoed as he walked down the aisle. Past Zoe, who watched him with fierce pride. Past Victoria, whose hand reached out as if to stop him or pull him back. He couldn't tell which. Past Gerald, whose smile faltered as Marcus climbed the stairs to the stage. Marcus stopped at the podium, looked out at the room, at the cameras, at the board members who'd already written him off, at the international partners who were here to judge Victoria's competence. "Give me 15 minutes, Marcus said quietly. His voice carried in the silence. Gerald stepped forward. "This is absurd. Remove him from—" "15 minutes, Victoria said. She was standing now, her voice steady for the first time since Gerald began. "It's my company. He gets 15 minutes. Gerald's face went red. "Victoria, don't be fool. Sit down, Gerald." The command in her voice surprised them both. Gerald's mouth snapped shut. He looked around for support from the board. Found none. Slowly, he stepped back. Marcus pulled out his phone, connected it to the presentation system. His hands were steady as he navigated to a file he hadn't opened in years. The screen behind him changed. Meridian's Singapore expansion project filled the display, the failing project. The one hemorrhaging money and time. Marcus looked at the design for a long moment, saw the problems immediately, the same way he'd always seen them, the same way he'd seen buildings his entire life, not as drawings, but as living things that either worked or didn't. He picked up the stylus from the podium's tablet, opened a blank layer over the existing design, and he began to draw. Marcus's scarred right hand moved across the tablet screen with a precision that made the room lean forward. He drew the way some people breathed, natural, essential. The stylus became an extension of thought, and the failing Singapore expansion transformed under his touch. He started with the foundation. The current design had the building sitting on pilings that fought the soil composition instead of working with it. Marcus redrew the approach. Deeper footings, distributed load-bearing across a wider base. The math appeared in neat annotations beside each line. "The ground shifts here," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "Clay soil, high water table. You can't force a structure into ground that won't hold it. You have to listen to what the earth is telling you." He moved to the structural frame. The existing design used steel in places where reinforced concrete would perform better and cost less. Marcus sketched the alternative, showed the load paths, explained how the forces would travel through the building during seismic events. "Singapore sits near a tectonic boundary," he continued. "The building needs to flex, not fight. These connections," he tapped the screen, "they're too rigid. When stress comes, they'll snap. But if you redesign them like this, the structure breathes." The room was silent except for the scratch of his stylus against glass. Marcus worked through the exterior envelope. The current cladding system leaked thermal efficiency and would require constant maintenance. He proposed an alternative that integrated passive cooling with the local climate, drew the details, showed the material layers. "This cuts your energy costs by 40%, he said, "and your construction timeline by 8 months. The materials are locally sourced. The labor requirements are simpler. The building becomes part of the community instead of sitting on top of it." He stepped back. The redesign filled the screen. 15 minutes. No notes, no reference materials, just vision made visible. Marcus set down the stylus, looked out at the room. 200 faces stared back, some confused, some skeptical, some beginning to understand. One of the international partners, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and silver jewelry, raised her hand. "What's your name?" she asked. "Marcus St. Clair." She pulled out her tablet, typed. Her eyes widened. She turned the screen toward her colleague, whispered something. The colleague's eyebrows lifted. "You're the Marcus St. Clair," she said. Not a question, a realization. "Boston Waterfront Project 2015, that was you." Another partner spoke up. "Miami Cultural Center. I was on the design review board. That was revolutionary work." "Atlanta Civic Plaza," a third said, scrolling through images on his phone. "It won international awards." The woman looked from her tablet to Marcus. "You disappeared after the accident. Everyone thought you were dead." "I wasn't dead," Marcus said quietly, "just taking care of what mattered." She studied the redesign on the screen, zoomed in on the structural details, checked the load calculations. After a long moment, she looked at her colleagues. "This is brilliant," she said. "Better than what we have, better than anything we've seen." Another partner nodded. "The timeline savings alone justify reconsidering the entire approach." Gerald's face had gone white, his mouth opened, closed. The accusations he'd built his attack on, fraud, failure, desperation, crumbled under the weight of what Marcus had just demonstrated. This wasn't a has-been. This was a master who'd chosen love over legacy and somehow remained both. Victoria stood. Every eye turned to her. She moved from her seat to the center aisle. Her heels clicked against the floor. When she spoke, her voice was steady, clear. "If you can't see the value of a man who sacrificed genius to raise his daughter," she said, "you don't deserve to run a company that builds homes for families." The board members shifted in their seats. Gerald stepped forward, his composure cracking. "Victoria, you can't be serious. The merger." "The merger is off," she said, "unless it happens on my terms, with my leadership, and with Marcus St. Clair as lead consultant on every project this company touches going forward." "You're bluffing," Gerald snapped. "You need this merger. Your board will never. Try me." The two words hung in the air. Victoria's gaze swept the room. Board members, partners, press. She was calling Gerald's bluff in front of everyone, burning it all down rather than accept his version of what leadership looked like. The younger board members exchanged glances. One woman stood, then another. The international partners huddled briefly. The lead partner, the woman who'd recognized Marcus's work, turned to Victoria. "We came here to invest in vision," she said. "I think we just saw it. The merger proceeds. On your terms. With Mr. St. Clair's involvement." Gerald's jaw worked. "You can't. This isn't." "Gerald." The board chair spoke for the first time, an older man with kind eyes. "I think it's time you step down." "What?" "You've lost the room, and frankly, you've lost perspective." The chair gestured to Marcus. "That man just solved the problem in 15 minutes. That's been bleeding us for 6 months. Victoria brought him here. That's leadership. You tried to destroy him for it. That's not. Gerald's face flushed red. He looked around for support. Found none. Slowly, his shoulders sagged. He gathered his materials and walked toward the exit. He didn't look back. The room exhaled. Victoria turned to Marcus. He was still standing by the presentation screen, Zoe beside him now, her small hand in his. Victoria walked toward them. Camera flashes popped. The press shouted questions. She ignored them all. When she reached Marcus, she didn't hesitate. She crossed the last few feet between them and kissed him. Not the practiced press of lips they performed at galas. Not the practiced press of lips they performed at galas. Not careful or measured. This was fierce and public and completely improper. Her hands on his face, his free arm wrapping around her waist, the room erupting in camera flashes and shocked whispers. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria kept her face close to his. "The contract's over," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "This is real." Marcus's eyes searched hers. She saw the question there, the same one she'd been asking herself for weeks. "Are you sure?" She was. He smiled. That rare, transforming smile that made him look younger, lighter, like a man who just remembered how to hope. He kissed her again. Shorter this time, softer. A promise instead of a declaration. Zoe tugged on Victoria's sleeve. Victoria looked down. The girl was grinning, her yellow ribbons bright against her dark braids. "Does this mean you're staying?" Zoe asked. Victoria crouched down to her level. "Is that okay with you?" Zoe threw her arms around Victoria's neck. "Yes." The room dissolved into noise. Board members surrounded Victoria with questions. Partners wanted to shake Marcus's hand. The press tried to push forward. Through it all, Marcus kept his fingers laced with Victoria's, anchored. A younger board member approached, smiling. "I think we have a lot to discuss about this Singapore project, and several others." Marcus nodded. "I'm listening." "Also?" The board member glanced at Victoria. "We're going to need to restructure some committees, get some fresh perspectives on leadership." "Good," Victoria said. The chaos continued for another hour. Handshakes, photographs, impromptu meetings. By the time they finally left the conference hall, the sun was setting over Atlanta. Golden light poured through the windows. Marcus, Victoria, and Zoe walked to the parking garage together. Zoe chattered about the boardroom, about the cameras, about how cool it was that her dad could draw buildings on a computer. Marcus answered her questions with patient detail. Victoria listened, her hand still warm in his. At the car, Zoe climbed into the back seat, pulled out her sketchbook, started drawing immediately. Marcus turned to Victoria. They stood in the amber light, the city humming around them. "What happens now?" he asked. Victoria looked at him. This man who'd walked into her life 6 weeks ago as a transaction and somehow become the only real thing in it. "We figure it out," she said. Together, Marcus repeated. He liked the sound of that. They got in the car, Zoe in back, already lost in her sketches. Marcus and Victoria in front, their hands finding each other across the console. The driver pulled out of the garage and into traffic. Through the window, Atlanta gleamed in the fading light. A city of buildings Marcus once helped shape, and might shape again. But this time, not alone. This time, with people who saw him. All of him. The grief and the gift. The sacrifice and the strength. The cafe worker and the architect. This time, he was building something that mattered. 3 months later, Marcus stood at the window of his new office on the 7th floor of Meridian Global. The view stretched across downtown Atlanta toward the old Fourth Ward. He could see the streets he used to walk with Zoe. The corner store where Mr. Davis still sold newspapers. The tree-lined blocks where neighbors still greeted each other by name. His desk was covered with blueprints. Affordable housing, mixed-income developments, buildings designed to serve the people who'd lived in these neighborhoods. Buildings designed to serve the people who'd lived in these neighborhoods long before glass towers started rising. This was his first real architectural work in 7 years, and every line he drew felt like coming home. His phone buzzed. "Video call from Zoe," he answered. Her face filled the screen, braids tied with green ribbons today, bright sunlight behind her. "Dad, look what I made." She held up a sketch. A community center with wide doors and rooftop gardens. The proportions were off, but the vision was there. Marcus smiled. That's beautiful, kiddo. Tell me about the gardens. They're for people to grow food. And there's solar panels. And a ramp so everyone can get in. She talked fast, the way she always did when she was excited. Can you help me fix the measurements when I get home? Of course. Love you, Dad. Love you too. The call ended. Marcus set down his phone and returned to his work. The design in front of him was for the old Fourth Ward project. 60 units. Retail on the ground floor. Green space. Community room. He'd spent weeks walking the neighborhood, talking to residents, understanding what they needed. This wasn't architecture as ego. This was architecture as service. His office door opened. Victoria stepped in, holding 2 coffees. She was in a gray suit today, her hair pulled back, but something about her had softened in the past 3 months. She smiled more, moved less like she was late for something. Ready? She asked. Almost. They were presenting the design to the community tonight. Open meeting at the local rec center. Anyone could attend, ask questions, voice concerns. Marcus had insisted on it. Victoria had agreed without hesitation. That evening, they walked into the rec center together. The room was packed, folding chairs arranged in rows, a projector set up at the front. Residents filled the seats, older folks who'd lived here for decades, young families, business owners, activists who'd fought gentrification for years. Marcus and Victoria stood at the front. Marcus pulled up the design on the screen. Started talking. He explained the building's footprint, how it fit the block, showed the unit layouts, pointed out the retail spaces reserved for local businesses. A woman in the 3rd row raised her hand. How do we know this won't just push us out? Every developer says they're for the community. Then rent goes up and we're gone. Marcus nodded. That's a fair question. The answer is accountability. 20% of units are permanently affordable, locked into the deed. Another 30% are moderate income. We're working with a community land trust to ensure long-term stability, and we're hiring local contractors for construction. A man in the back spoke up. What about parking? We don't all have cars, but the ones who do need space. Street-level parking for residents, plus bike storage and bus stop access. We can adjust the ratio if the community thinks we need more. Questions came rapid fire. Marcus answered each one. When he didn't know something, he said so and wrote it down. When residents suggested changes, he sketched them on the fly. Victoria watched him work, patient, collaborative, genuinely listening. This wasn't a sales pitch. This was a conversation. An older woman stood. She had gray hair and kind eyes and a voice that commanded attention. I've lived here 50 years, she said. Seen a lot of promises. But you, she pointed at Marcus. You're from here, aren't you? I am, Marcus said. Old Fourth Ward, 3 blocks east. My daughter goes to school 2 streets over. The woman studied him, then nodded. Then you know what's at stake. I do. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, residents were still asking questions, but the tone had shifted from skepticism to cautious engagement. They weren't sold, but they were listening. That was enough for now. Outside, the air was cool. November in Atlanta, the kind of evening where you could see your breath. Marcus and Victoria walked to the car in comfortable silence. You were good in there, Victoria said. They deserved honesty. Still, you could have just presented and left. You stayed. You listened. Marcus looked at her. That's the job. Victoria smiled. She eased to 500th restructured Meridian's board after Gerald left, brought in younger voices, shifted the company's focus towards sustainable development and community investment. It was messier than her old approach, more compromises, more conversations, more humanity. But it felt right. They got in the car. The driver pulled away from the curb. Victoria's hand found Marcus's across the seat. They'd been navigating this, whatever this was, for 3 months now, taking it slow. Marcus still had his apartment. Victoria still had her penthouse. Zoe was adjusting to seeing Victoria more often, testing boundaries, figuring out where Victoria fit in their lives. It was messy. It was uncertain. It was real. Can we make a stop? Marcus asked the driver. Where to? Oakland Cemetery. Victoria didn't ask why. She just squeezed his hand. The cemetery was quiet at this hour. Streetlights cast long shadows across the headstones. Marcus led the way down familiar paths. Victoria stayed a respectful distance back, waiting by a oak tree while Marcus walked the last few steps alone. Simone's grave was simple, a flat stone marker, her name, her dates. The words, beloved wife, mother, architect, beneath. Marcus knelt, placed his hand on the cool granite. The November wind moved through the trees, carrying the smell of earth and approaching rain. I'm working again, he said quietly, designing buildings, taking care of Zoe, trying to figure out what comes next. He paused. You told me once that love isn't what you give up. It's what you build afterward. I didn't understand that then. I do now. The wind picked up. Leaves skittered across the path. Zoe's thriving. She's got your talent, your vision. She's going to be something extraordinary. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. And there's someone, Victoria, she's complicated, brilliant, broken in some of the same ways I am. I think you'd have liked her. I think you'd tell me to stop being scared. He stayed there for another minute, then stood. Brushed dirt from his knees. When he turned, Victoria was waiting where he'd left her, patient and present. Marcus walked to her. She didn't ask if he was okay, didn't offer empty comfort, just took his hand. They walked back to the car together. Zoe was in the back seat, already picked up from her after-school program. She looked up from her sketchbook as they got in. Where'd you go? She asked. Visited your mom, Marcus said. Zoe nodded. Went back to her drawing. The car pulled away from the cemetery, back toward the city lights. Marcus looked down at his hand in Victoria's, scarred, imperfect, but still capable of creating something beautiful, still capable of building. The car merged onto the highway. Atlanta spread out before them. Old neighborhoods and new construction, history and future, loss and possibility all woven together. Marcus watched it pass, and for the first time in 7 years, he felt like he belonged in both worlds, the one he'd lost and the one he was building. True worth isn't found in the titles we hold, but in the sacrifices we make for those we love. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be seen, scars and all.